remember the exact moment my future disappeared. I was 17, sitting at our kitchen table doing calculus homework, when Mom walked in with that look on her face, the one that meant she'd already made a decision and was just informing me about it. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug and said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. "Sweetheart, your father would have wanted Jason to have the money. You'll be fine on your own." The words didn't register at first. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, the clarification, anything that would make this make sense, but she just sipped her coffee and looked out the window. That wasn't her money to give away. It was mine. Dad had set it aside specifically for my education, told me about it when I was 14, promised me he'd make sure I could go to any college I wanted. He died 2 years ago, and that fund was the last piece of him I had left. Mom had just erased it in one sentence. Erased Dad's promise. Erased my plans. Erased 4 years of straight A's and scholarship applications and dreams of studying engineering at a real university. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up completely. All I could do was sit there while my entire future crumbled around me. Jason walked in about 20 minutes later, still wearing yesterday's clothes, smelling like beer and cigarettes. He'd been out partying again, skipping his community college classes like he always did. He was 19, 2 years older than me, and he'd never taken anything seriously in his entire life. Mom told him the news with this bright, hopeful smile. "Jason, honey, we've decided to use Emily's college fund for your tuition. You can transfer to state next semester." His whole face lit up. He actually hugged her, kissed her cheek, told her she was the best mom ever. Then he saw Dad's old car keys sitting on the counter, the ones Dad had given me on my 16th birthday, the ones I'd been driving to school and my part-time job for the past year. Jason picked them up, dangling them from his finger. "Guess this means I'll need a car for campus, right? Can't take the bus like a loser." Mom nodded. "Of course, sweetheart, Emily can take the bus, she doesn't mind." Nobody asked if I minded. Jason pocketed my keys, grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed back upstairs to sleep off his hangover. He didn't even look at me. I was invisible, irrelevant, just an obstacle that had been conveniently removed from his path. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them see what they were doing, but I just smiled back, tight, bitter, and completely silent. The next morning I skipped school and went to the bank. Dad had opened the account when I was 10, adding money every month, sometimes slipping me the statements to show me how it was growing. "Your future," he'd called it. "Your ticket out." I gave the teller my information, waited while she pulled up the account, and watched her expression shift from neutral to confused. She checked her screen twice before looking at me with something like pity. "I'm sorry, but this account shows a zero balance. All funds were transferred yesterday to an account under Jason Winter's name." My hands started shaking. How much was in there? The transfer was for $47,312. I'd known it was happening. Mom had told me, but seeing it confirmed, hearing the exact amount that had been stolen from me, made it real in a way that physically hurt. That wasn't just money. That was 4 years of college. That was Dad's belief in me, his promises, his voice telling me I was smart enough and capable enough and worthy enough. I sat in my car, no, not my car anymore, the bus stop, for 3 hours, staring at nothing. When I finally went home, Jason's new gaming console was set up in the living room. I confronted Mom that evening. I'd spent all day rehearsing what I'd say, trying to find words that would make her understand. My voice shook when I finally spoke. "Why him? Why take everything Dad left for me?" She didn't even look up from the chicken she was seasoning. Her hands moved methodically, coating each piece like this was just another ordinary evening. "Because you'll survive, Emily. You always do. You're smart and responsible. Jason needs more support. He's struggling to find his way." I worked for 4 years for straight A's. Jason barely passes his classes when he bothers to show up. That's exactly why he needs this opportunity. You'll get scholarships, you'll figure it out. Jason needs structure, real college, a chance to prove himself. She finally looked at me and her expression was so calm, so certain. "Your father would understand. Family helps family. Dad left that money for me specifically. And now I'm using it to help both my children. Jason needs it more." She turned back to her cooking. "I'm making your favorite for dinner. Be grateful for what you have instead of focusing on what you don't." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd stolen. Just a reminder that being strong meant I was expected to suffer quietly while my brother got everything handed to him. Jason transferred to State University that spring. I watched him pack, taking the car Dad had given me, wearing new clothes Mom had bought with what was left of my college fund. He was excited, talking about fraternity rush and football games and finally, living his best life. I'd gotten a partial scholarship to community college. It covered tuition but nothing else. So while Jason moved into his dorm with a mini fridge and a new laptop, I got a job at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. The night shift, because it paid an extra $1 per hour and the classes I could afford were only offered during the day. Every tip I made smelled like grease and desperation. Every exam I passed felt like a small act of rebellion against everyone who'd decided I wasn't worth investing in. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. I stopped calling Mom to check in. I stopped expecting anyone to notice I was drowning. My coworker Tasha asked me once why I pushed myself so hard. "Girl, you look exhausted, take a break." I couldn't explain it to her, couldn't tell her that stopping felt like admitting they'd been right to throw me away. So I just smiled and said I was fine, poured another coffee, took another order, added another tip to my slowly growing pile of survival money. I stopped waiting for anyone to save me, because clearly nobody would. 3 years crawled by. I graduated from community college with my associate degree and got accepted to State's engineering program. No help from Mom, no family celebration, just me and my acceptance letter, and the 2 jobs I'd have to keep to afford it. Then Jason's 23rd birthday happened. Mom called to make sure I was coming to his party. It's important to him that you're there. Family should support each other. The party was at a rented penthouse downtown. I showed up in my work clothes because I'd come straight from my shift and didn't own anything fancy enough for a place with marble floors. Champagne fountains bubbled in the corner. Jason's friends wore designer labels and talked about their post-graduation trips to Europe. A brand new Mercedes sat in the reserved parking spot outside. Navy blue leather interior still had the dealer plates. Jason's graduation gift, apparently. The last of Dad's fund, Mom announced proudly. We wanted to make sure Jason started his career right. Mom toasted him that night, glass raised high, voice thick with emotion. "We're so proud of you, Jason. Your father's sacrifice wasn't in vain. You're everything we hoped you'd become." Jason beamed, soaking in the attention, the praise, the celebration of his mediocre degree and non-existent job prospects. Nobody mentioned that I'd made Dean's List. Nobody asked about my transfer to State. I stood in the corner, invisible again, holding a glass of cheap wine someone had handed me. I left before they cut the cake. That night I went back to Mom's house. I couldn't call it home anymore, and packed everything I owned. It fit into 3 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes, 23 years of life reduced to what I could carry. Nobody noticed. Mom was still at the party. Jason was probably getting drunk with his friends. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, taking only what was definitely mine, leaving no trace that I'd ever existed in that space. I left a note on the fridge, held in place by a magnet from a family vacation Jason and I had taken when Dad was still alive. The paper was lined notebook paper, the kind I'd used for homework for years. I kept the message short. "I'll make it without you." And I did. I moved into a basement apartment on the east side, the kind of place where you could hear every footstep from the floor above, and the heating barely worked in winter. My roommate was a nursing student named Carmen who kept weird hours and didn't ask questions about why I never had family visit. I transferred to State, kept both jobs, lived on ramen and Spite. Every morning I woke up exhausted. Every night I fell asleep proud, because everything I had I'd built myself. The city was cold and merciless, especially that first winter. My basement apartment flooded twice, ruining textbooks I couldn't afford to replace. I got sick from stress and lack of sleep, but couldn't take time off work because I needed every dollar. My hands cracked and bled from washing dishes in the diner's scalding water. I slept in that basement for 18 months, juggling full-time classes and 2 part-time jobs until my body felt like it might actually break. My engineering professors assigned impossible amounts of homework. My diner manager scheduled me for every holiday because I never complained. My other job, stocking shelves at a grocery store, started at 5 in the morning. But somewhere between exhaustion and hunger, somewhere in the space where desperation met determination, I discovered something I'd never known I had. Drive, real, burning, unstoppable drive. I'd spent my whole life being the responsible one, the one who did what she was told and hoped people would notice and reward her goodness. But nobody had rewarded me. They'd just taken and taken until I had nothing left to give. So I stopped being good. I started being strategic. If I couldn't inherit opportunity, I'd build it. I'd claw my way up from this basement and never look back. During my junior year, I started freelancing. Graphic design at first because I'd taught myself Photoshop during slow shifts at the diner, then web design, then social media marketing. Anything someone would pay me to do, I learned how to do well. My first real client was a small flower shop on Henderson Street. The owner, Mrs. Park, was 65 and had never touched a computer. Her daughter had convinced her she needed a website, but she had no idea where to start. I built her a simple, clean site with online ordering. Then I created her Instagram account, posted beautiful photos of her arrangements, engaged with local wedding planners and event coordinators. I worked on her account for 30 minutes every morning before my first class, turning her modest shop into a destination. Her sales tripled in 2 months. Mrs. Park cried when she paid me, insisting I'd charged too little. She told everyone she knew about the brilliant young woman who saved my business. Referrals started coming in, other small business owners who needed help navigating the digital world. That's when I realized something crucial. Maybe I didn't need a degree from a fancy school that I'd paid for with family money. Maybe I just needed me, my brain, my work ethic, my absolute refusal to fail. Mom called one night during my senior year. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Emily, sweetheart, I'm so glad I caught you." Her voice was strained, trying too hard to sound casual. "Listen, Jason's dropped out again. It's not his fault. The program just wasn't the right fit. But we're just going through a rough patch financially, and I was wondering if you might be able to help out with his rent this month, just until he gets back on his feet." I almost laughed. Almost. Jason had dropped out of state after 3 years, no degree, nothing to show for the $47,000 that was supposed to be mine. And now Mom wanted me to bankroll his continued failure. "I can't help," I said simply. "Emily, he's your brother. Family helps family." "That's what you said when you gave him my college fund." Silence. "Then, you're still holding on to that. You're in college now, aren't you? Everything worked out." "Because I made it work, by myself, with no help from anyone." "You're being selfish," she said, her voice hardening. "Jason needs support right now and you're too proud to." I muted my phone and went back to work on a client's website redesign. When I unmuted it 15 minutes later, she'd hung up. I felt nothing. By 25, I'd registered my first official company, Winter's Digital Solutions. I'd kept Dad's name because it was mine too, even if Mom and Jason had abandoned everything it stood for. I filed all the paperwork myself, designed my own logo, built my own website. My name was on the business license, my work was in my portfolio, my savings was in an account only I could access. I rented a small office space, hired 2 part-time employees and started taking on bigger clients, real companies with real budgets. Every late night I spent building this business felt like the universe finally apologizing. Like someone somewhere was saying, "See, you were always enough, you never needed them. You just needed to believe in yourself as much as your father believed in you." I kept a photo of Dad on my desk. In it he was smiling at something off camera, and I was 7, gap-toothed, holding up a math test with a gold star. He'd always believed I was smart enough. It had just taken me years to believe it too. Mom called again on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a client presentation, but her name flashed on my screen 3 times in a row, so I excused myself and answered. "Emily, thank God, I need to ask you something." She didn't wait for me to respond. "Jason's starting a business, finally taking initiative, you know. He needs a website and some marketing materials. Could you maybe help him out? You know, family rates, or even free since he's just getting started." I stood in the hallway outside the conference room, watching cars pass by on the street below. My standard rate is $5,000 for a basic website package. Marketing materials are separate. "Emily, he can't afford that. He's family." "Then he can't afford my services." "You've become so cold," Mom said, and I could hear the disappointment dripping from every word. "Your father would be ashamed of how selfish you've become. My father left me money for college, and you gave it to Jason. Don't talk to me about what Dad would think." She hung up without saying goodbye. I went back into the conference room and closed the deal on a $30,000 contract. 5 years after I'd left with my note on the fridge, Mom guilt-tripped me into coming home for Thanksgiving. "It's been too long, Emily. Jason really wants to see you, please, for family." I drove there in my own car, a used Honda I'd bought myself, nothing fancy but it was mine, and braced myself for the inevitable awkwardness. The house looked the same, still smelled like Mom's vanilla candles, still had photos of Jason's high school football glory days on the walls. No photos of me. Jason had gained weight, lost the cocky confidence he'd carried at 23, and reeked of alcohol even though it wasn't even noon. He was 28 now, working part-time at a gym, living in Mom's basement. The Mercedes was gone, sold years ago for cash he'd burned through in months. Mom still defended him, making excuses over turkey and stuffing. "He's just waiting for the right opportunity. The economy is tough for young people. You were lucky to find your niche." Lucky, as if luck had anything to do with the years I'd spent working myself half to death while Jason partied away my future. "So am I said, meeting her eyes, still waiting for my opportunity." They didn't realize I'd already found it. They had no idea my company had just landed its first 6-figure client, that I'd moved into a real apartment with actual heating, that I was saving money and building something permanent. I left right after dinner, making an excuse about work in the morning. 2 years later, my company was featured in Forbes Women Under 30. From broke student to CEO, how Emily Winters built a 6-figure business with nothing but determination. The interview was honest, maybe too honest. I talked about working multiple jobs through college. I mentioned the college fund that disappeared. I didn't name my family, but anyone who knew me would recognize the story. The article went viral. My phone exploded with messages, old classmates, former professors, business contacts, and one text from Mom. "Wow, so proud of you, sweetheart. Always knew you'd do something special." I stared at that message for a long time. She was proud now, when I had something worth bragging about, when being associated with me made her look good instead of just requiring her to actually support me. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the article to Mrs. Park, the flower shop owner who'd been my first real client. She texted back immediately. "I always knew. So happy for you, dear. You earned every bit of this." That meant more than Mom's empty pride ever could. Jason sent me a Facebook message 3 weeks after the article published. I hadn't heard from him directly in over 2 years, and suddenly there he was, sliding into my inbox like we were close. "Hey sis, long time no talk. Congrats on all your success, really impressive stuff. I've been thinking about getting into the digital marketing space myself. Any chance you have any job openings? Would love to work together, learn from the best." I read the message 3 times, feeling my anger build with each word. Learn from the best, as if he hadn't spent his entire life taking everything that should have been mine. As if Mom hadn't handed him my future on a silver platter while I scraped by on tips and student loans. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, though part of me wanted him to feel ignored the way I'd felt invisible, but mostly because I remembered being 17, sitting at that kitchen table, hearing his laughter from upstairs while my college fund disappeared and my car keys changed hands. He'd had his chance, he'd had my chance, and he'd wasted it completely. Mom showed up at my office 2 days later, unannounced. My assistant tried to stop her, but Mom pushed past, barging into my office during a meeting like she had every right to interrupt my workday. "Emily, we need to talk, right now." I excused my clients, who looked uncomfortable witnessing this family drama. After they left, I closed the door and turned to face her. She looked smaller than I remembered, older. The past 7 years hadn't been kind to her. "Jason sent you his resume," she said. "He told me you ignored him." "I've been busy." "Too busy for family," her voice cracked. "Emily, please, he just needs a chance. Look at everything you've built. You have so much now. You could afford to help your brother." I leaned back against my desk, arms crossed. The office around us represented years of sacrifice, late nights, missed social events, constant grinding. Every piece of furniture, every computer, every success had been earned through my own effort. "You gave him my chance," I said quietly. "Remember, Dad's college fund that was supposed to be mine, the car, the support, the belief. You gave him everything and told me I'd be fine on my own." Her face crumbled, tears starting to form. That was years ago. Are you really going to hold a grudge forever? It's not a grudge, it's a boundary. I told her to have Jason send his resume officially, through my company's website like any other applicant. I wanted to see what the golden boy had actually accomplished in the decade since he'd taken my future. The resume arrived 3 days later. I opened it during my lunch break, sitting alone in my office with coffee and a sandwich from the place down the street. It was embarrassingly thin, 1 page barely, no degree, he dropped out after 3 years and never gone back. No steady work history, just a series of part-time jobs, each lasting a few months before he'd quit or been fired. His current position was listed as independent fitness consultant, which I knew meant he helped old ladies use the elliptical machines at Planet Fitness. Under skills, he'd listed social media expert and marketing enthusiast. I almost laughed. I'd built a company on actual expertise, and he thought enthusiasm was a qualification. At the bottom in the references section, he'd listed Mom's phone number and name. Not a former employer, not a professional contact. Just Mom, still trying to advocate for him like he was a child. I'd been right all along. Jason hadn't just wasted my opportunity. He'd wasted his own potential, whatever he might have had, by expecting everything to be handed to him without effort. The interview was scheduled for the following Wednesday. I had my assistant set it up, treating Jason exactly like any other applicant. No special treatment, no guaranteed position, just a standard interview slot. He arrived 20 minutes late. No apology, no acknowledgement that I'd blocked time in my schedule specifically for him. He wore jeans and a rumpled polo shirt, didn't bring a folder or notepad or any indication he'd prepared for this meeting. My assistant showed him into my office, and he dropped into the chair across from my desk with that old familiar arrogance I remembered from when we were younger. That smile that said the world owed him something. "Guess I don't need to impress my own sister, huh?" he said, leaning back like we were just hanging out. "This should be pretty straightforward." I opened his resume on my computer, scanning it again even though I'd memorized every thin line. "Walk me through your experience with digital marketing." "Well, I mean, I use Instagram and stuff. I get how it works." "Can you discuss any specific campaigns you've managed? Metrics, ROI, audience growth strategies?" He blinked at me. "I mean, I have a lot of followers on my personal account." The interview lasted 5 more minutes. I asked standard questions, gave him chances to demonstrate any actual knowledge or skill. He had nothing. He'd spent 10 years doing nothing while I'd built an actual company, and he genuinely believed his last name entitled him to a position he wasn't qualified for. I ended the meeting professionally. "Thank you for coming in, Jason. We'll be in touch." "We wouldn't." Mom called that night. I was working late, reviewing proposals for a new client when her name lit up my screen. I almost sent it to voicemail, but I knew she'd just keep calling. "How could you?" Her voice was sharp, angry, nothing like the pleading tone from her office visit. "How could you humiliate him like that, treat him like a stranger?" "I treated him like an applicant, that's what he was." "He's your brother. You interviewed him like he was nobody, asked him impossible questions just to make him feel stupid. He came home devastated." I set down my pen, feeling my own anger rise to match hers. I asked him basic questions about the job he applied for, questions any qualified candidate could have answered. He couldn't answer them because he's not qualified. "You're successful because of luck, Emily. Don't forget where you came from." "I'm successful because I worked for it." My voice was colder than I'd ever spoken to her. While Jason was partying with my college fund, I was working double shifts. While he was driving my car around campus, I was taking the bus to 2 jobs and night classes. I didn't get lucky. I got desperate and I got determined. There's a difference. "How can you be so cruel, after everything we've done for you?" The words hit like a slap. Everything they'd done for me. The casual erasure of every obstacle they'd created, every opportunity they'd stolen, every moment they'd chosen Jason over me. "What exactly have you done for me, Mom? Name one thing." Silence long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. "Then, we raised you, we gave you a home, You took my college fund and gave it to Jason. You took my car. You took Dad's belief in me and handed it to someone who didn't earn it and didn't appreciate it." I was shaking now, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. The only thing you taught me was that I couldn't count on anyone but myself. You're being vindictive. You're punishing him for something that happened years ago. I'm protecting what I built. There's a difference. She hung up without saying goodbye. I went back to my proposal, hands still trembling with rage and something like grief. The line went dead, and I sat in the silence of my office, surrounded by everything I'd accomplished without them. A week later, Jason posted on social media. I didn't see it at first. I'd unfollowed him years ago, but multiple people sent me screenshots, assuming I'd want to know. The post was a long, rambling paragraph about family and betrayal. Never mix family and business, it started. Some people forget where they came from. They get a little success, and suddenly they're too good for the people who supported them their whole lives. Real character shows when someone has the chance to help their own blood and chooses pride instead. The comments were predictably supportive. Friends who didn't know the full story offering sympathy, telling him he deserved better, suggesting I was ungrateful and arrogant. A few people who knew me from college defended me, but Jason's narrative was simpler and more appealing. Successful sister abandons struggling brother. I could have responded, could have posted the truth, that they'd stolen my college fund, that I'd built everything myself, that Jason had wasted every opportunity handed to him. I had receipts, evidence, years of documentation. But I didn't. I let him have his tantrum, let him play the victim for his audience. Because this time I wasn't 17. This time I wasn't powerless or invisible or desperate for their approval. This time I was untouchable. 6 months after Jason's social media meltdown, I was cleaning out old files and found a letter I'd forgotten existed. It was in a box of Dad's things Mom had eventually sent me years late, after I'd asked for them repeatedly. The envelope had my name written in Dad's handwriting, dated for my 18th birthday. I turned 18 3 months after he died, so I'd never received it. Mom had kept it, probably forgotten about it, finally sent it with a bunch of his old books and papers. I opened it carefully, and Dad's voice came through in every line. Emily, by now you're heading off to college. I'm so proud of the woman you're becoming. Remember that your education is your weapon. Use it wisely and don't let anyone dull your spark. You're smarter than you know, stronger than you believe, and capable of absolutely anything you set your mind to. I wish I could be there to see all the amazing things you're going to accomplish. Love always, Dad. I cried for the first time in years. Not from pain or anger or frustration, but from something else. Victory, maybe, or vindication, or just the simple relief of knowing that someone had believed in me once, really believed, and that I'd proven them right. Dad had known. He'd set aside that money specifically because he'd seen something in me. And even though Mom had stolen it, even though Jason had wasted it, I'd still become exactly who Dad had believed I could be. Mom called again months later. It was early morning before my first meeting, and her number appearing on my screen filled me with the usual dread, but something in her voice was different this time when I answered. Smaller, uncertain, almost afraid. Emily, do you have a minute? I have 5, I said, glancing at my calendar. I just wanted to say, she paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. I was wrong, about the college fund, about how I treated you, about all of it. I waited, didn't make it easy for her. After years of expecting me to just accept and forgive and move on, she could sit in the uncomfortable silence for once. I thought I was helping both my children, she continued. I thought Jason needed more support because you were so capable, but I see now that I wasn't supporting him, I was enabling him, and I was punishing you for being strong enough to survive my neglect. Okay, I said simply. That's it, just okay. What do you want me to say, Mom? Thank you for finally admitting something I've known for a decade, that all the years I spent struggling were unnecessary because you chose to give my future to someone who threw it away. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. You don't, I interrupted, but my voice wasn't angry anymore, just tired. But I'm not carrying this anymore either. You made your choices, I survived them, that's all there is. I didn't gloat, didn't rub her face in how wrong she'd been. I just acknowledged the truth and hung up, getting back to the work that mattered. Jason was arrested for fraud 8 months later. I saw the news online, clicking through to read the details with a strange sense of inevitability. He'd been running some kind of investment scheme, promising guaranteed returns, using new investors' money to pay old ones. A classic pyramid scheme, and he'd managed it about as well as he'd managed everything else in his life. $30,000 stolen from people who trusted him, mostly older folks from the gym where he worked, people who'd liked him and believed his promises of easy money. People like Mrs. Park, who trusted me with her business and gotten results, versus people who trusted Jason and gotten robbed. Mom called crying, begging me to help pay for his lawyer. I declined, offered her the name of a good public defender instead, hung up before she could argue. I didn't celebrate Jason's downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching my brother get arrested, no vindication in seeing him face consequences for the first time in his life. But I also didn't save him, didn't empty my business account to fund his defense, didn't sacrifice what I'd built to bail out someone who'd never sacrificed anything for me. He'd made his choices, taken his shortcuts, assumed the world owed him success without effort. Now he was facing reality. A year later, I was invited to speak at a Women in Business conference downtown. 500 attendees, most of them young women trying to start their own companies, all of them looking for inspiration and practical advice. I stood on that stage in a dress I'd bought myself, with a company I'd built myself, and told them the truth. Not the sanitized version, not the everything works out fairy tale, the real story. Sometimes the people who clip your wings are the ones too afraid to fly themselves, I said, looking out at all those hopeful faces. They'll tell you to wait your turn, to be patient, to accept less because someone else needs more. They'll make you feel selfish for wanting what was promised to you, guilty for protecting what you've earned. I saw heads nodding, recognition in their eyes. This wasn't just my story, it was their stories too, in different forms. But you don't owe them your silence, you don't owe them your sacrifice, you owe yourself your sky, you owe yourself the chance to fly as high as your wings can take you. And if the people who were supposed to support you can't handle your success, that's not your failure, that's theirs. The crowd stood, applause thundering through the ballroom, and in the back, partially hidden by a pillar, I spotted Mom. She was crying quietly, and our eyes met across that crowded room. I didn't smile, didn't wave, just acknowledged her presence and continued with my speech. After it ended, she was gone. 5 years after that speech, I bought my parents' old house, the one where Mom had told me my future didn't matter as much as Jason, the one where I'd packed my life into boxes and left a note on the fridge, the one where I'd learned that I could only count on myself. Mom had been forced to sell after Jason's legal fees drained her savings. She'd called to let me know it was going on the market, maybe hoping I'd help her avoid foreclosure. I'd bought it through my attorney, kept my name off the paperwork until the sale was final. I didn't move in, didn't need to live in those rooms, surrounded by memories of being overlooked and undervalued. Instead, I renovated it completely, transforming it into a foundation headquarters, the Emily Winters Scholarship Foundation for young women whose families couldn't afford their dreams. On the plaque outside, I had them engrave, for every girl told she'd be fine on her own,